The lunch rush was supposed to be ordinary, just another Tuesday at the KFC on Highway 98 in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. The smell of fried chicken filled the air, customers chatted over their meals, and the gospel station played softly from the kitchen radio. But the manager, a man named Earl Thompson, noticed something strange. The men's restroom door had been locked for 48 minutes. No one had come out. No one had gone in. Just silence behind that door. And when it finally did open, what came out would tear a family apart, leave 2 people dead on the tile floor, and send an entire Florida town into shock. This is the story of Jamal Washington, a man who walked into that bathroom and discovered a betrayal so deep, so unthinkable, that it would end in murder. Welcome to Silent Witness True Crime Stories. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay tuned for daily true crime updates. Don't forget to subscribe, and also download your free ebook by clicking the link in the pinned comment. People walked into that KFC on April 16, 2024. Only one would walk out alive, and by the end of the week, all 3 would be dead. Jamal Washington was 37 years old, a maintenance man who worked long hours to support his family. He was known around town as a quiet, dependable guy who went to church every Sunday and never caused trouble. His wife, Carla Washington, was 35, a community sweetheart who volunteered at the local food bank and always had a smile on her face. And then there was Robert Washington, 61 years old, Jamal's father, a retired trucker who had been absent from his son's life for 2 decades. He had recently come back, claiming he was sober and ready to make amends. Within hours of that bathroom door opening, 2 of them would be dead, one by rage, the other by guilt. But what could drive a man to kill his wife and his own father inside a fast food restaurant? Was this a crime of passion or something more calculated? How long had the affair been going on? And what secret was Robert Washington hiding from his son that made this betrayal even more unforgivable? To everyone else, Jamal and Carla were the kind of couple that made marriage look easy. They lived in a modest 2-bedroom house on the east side of Fort Walton Beach, a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew each other's names. Their Facebook page was filled with photos of cookouts, church picnics, and anniversary posts. Carla had written just 3 weeks before the incident. 10 years with my best friend. Family is everything. The comments section was filled with heart emojis and congratulations. Jamal worked as a maintenance supervisor at a local apartment complex, often putting in 12-hour days to make sure his family was comfortable. Carla worked part-time at a daycare center and spent her free time organizing donation drives for families in need. They didn't have children of their own, but they talked about adopting someday. To the outside world, they were solid, but behind those smiles were cracks that had been growing for years. Neighbors would later recall hearing raised voices late at night, the kind of arguments that ended with doors slamming and long silences. Jamal's co-worker, a man named Marcus, remembered him saying once, "I don't know who she is anymore. She's always on that phone." But Jamal never went into detail. He was private like that. He kept his pain to himself. And maybe that's what made the explosion so much worse when it finally came. The real change began 6 months earlier, in October of 2023, when Robert Washington showed up unannounced at Jamal's front door. Jamal hadn't seen his father in 20 years. Robert had left when Jamal was 17, disappearing into a life of drinking, gambling, and women. There were no birthday calls, no Christmas cards, nothing. Jamal had learned to live without him. But Robert claimed he was different now. He said he'd been sober for 2 years, that he'd found God, and that he wanted to make things right before it was too late. Carla, always the optimist, encouraged Jamal to give him a chance. "He's your father," she said. "Everyone deserves a second chance." So Jamal let him in. At first, it seemed like a good decision. Robert started coming around for Sunday dinners, helping Jamal fix things around the house, even attending church with them. Carla seemed to take a special interest in rebuilding the relationship, often acting as the bridge between father and son. She'd invite Robert over when Jamal was working late, saying she wanted to keep him company so he wouldn't feel lonely. Jamal appreciated it. He thought it was sweet, but then things started to feel off. Carla's phone, which used to sit casually on the kitchen counter, was now always in her purse, always locked, always face down. She started going out more, saying she was meeting friends or running errands, but she'd come home hours later with nothing to show for it. And Robert's visits became more frequent, more casual, more familiar. A neighbor, an older woman named Miss Claudia, would later tell police that she saw Robert's truck parked outside the Washington house on multiple occasions when Jamal's car wasn't there. "I thought maybe he was just helping out with repairs," she said. "But one night I heard them laughing real loud through the window. It didn't sound like a father-in-law and daughter-in-law kind of laugh, if you know what I mean." Jamal started to feel it too. The way Carla lit up when Robert walked in, the way she'd touch his arm when she laughed at his jokes, the way she'd get defensive whenever Jamal asked where she'd been. One night in early April, Jamal came home early from work and found Carla and Robert sitting close together on the couch, their faces inches apart, talking in hushed tones. When Jamal walked in, they both jumped. Carla laughed it off, said they were just talking about old times. But Jamal didn't believe her. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed next to his wife, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was losing his mind, or if something was really happening. The doubt ate at him. The suspicion grew, and on April 16th, 2024, that suspicion would turn into a nightmare he could never unsee. April 16th started like any other day. Jamal woke up at 6 a.m, made coffee, kissed Carla on the forehead, and headed to work. She was still in bed, scrolling through her phone. He noticed she didn't look up when he said goodbye. At around 11:30 that morning, Jamal got a text from Carla. It said, "Going out for lunch with Rachel? Be back later." Rachel was Carla's friend from church, someone Jamal trusted. But something didn't sit right. Maybe it was the way she'd been acting lately, or maybe it was just instinct. But Jamal decided to check. He called Rachel. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Jamal, what's up?" she said, her voice cheerful. "I was just calling to see if you and Carla were still on for lunch," he said, trying to keep his tone casual. There was a pause. "Lunch? I'm at work. I haven't talked to Carla since Sunday." Jamal's stomach dropped. He thanked Rachel, hung up, and sat in his truck for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel. His hands were shaking. He pulled up the Find My Phone app, something he and Carla had set up years ago for emergencies. Her location popped up immediately. She was at the KFC on Highway 98, less than 10 minutes away. Jamal's heart pounded as he drove. His mind raced with possibilities. Maybe she was just grabbing food. Maybe she was meeting someone else. Maybe he was overreacting. But when he pulled into the parking lot and saw his father's truck parked near the back, everything inside him went cold. He sat in his car for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, watching the entrance. Neither of them came out. He checked the app again. Carla's phone was still inside. He got out of the truck and walked toward the building, his legs feeling heavy, like he was walking through water. Inside, the KFC was busy. Families sat in booths. Kids laughed over chicken tenders. The fryer hissed in the background. Earl Thompson, the manager, was behind the counter taking orders. Jamal scanned the room. No sign of Carla or Robert. He walked toward the restrooms. The women's room door was open, empty, but the men's room door was locked. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. "Occupied," a voice said. It was his father's voice. Jamal felt his chest tighten. He knocked again, this time pounding. "Open the door." Silence. Then he heard it, a woman's voice, hushed and panicked. "Jamal, don't." It was Carla. Everything after that happened in a blur. Jamal's vision tunneled. His hands moved on their own, trying the handle, slamming his shoulder into the door. Earl came running over, asking what was wrong, but Jamal didn't hear him. He just kept hitting the door until it finally gave way, the cheap lock snapping under the pressure. And when the door swung open, Jamal saw them. His wife, his father. Carla's face went white. Robert tried to step forward, tried to say something, but Jamal didn't hear it. The sound in the room disappeared. All he could hear was his own heartbeat, loud and fast and deafening. He reached into his jacket. Earl saw it first and yelled, "Gun!" Customers screamed, people ran, and then the shots rang out. 2, 3, 4. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. Carla collapsed against the sink. Robert fell backward into the stall. Jamal stood there, breathing hard, the gun still in his hand. Earl was on the phone with 911, his voice shaking. "Shots fired, shots fired. We need help now." But Jamal didn't stay. He turned and walked out of the bathroom, through the restaurant, past the screaming customers, and out into the parking lot. He got into his truck, started the engine, and drove away. By the time police arrived 3 minutes later, 2 bodies were on the floor, and Jamal Washington was nowhere to be found. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. When officers entered the KFC, the scene was chaos. Customers were huddled in corners, some crying, some recording on their phones. Earl was standing near the restroom door, pale and shaking, pointing inside. The 2 officers who entered first would later say it was one of the most disturbing scenes they'd ever witnessed. Carla Washington was slumped against the sink, her eyes open, blood pooling beneath her. Robert Washington was on his back in the stall, his hand still reaching toward the door. Both had been shot multiple times at close range. There was no question it was intentional. The medical examiner would later confirm that both victims died within minutes. One of the officers noticed something on the floor near Carla's body. Her phone, cracked but still lit up. On the screen was a text thread with a contact saved as R. The messages went back months. "He's working late again. Come over. I miss you already. We have to be more careful." The officer bagged the phone as evidence. Outside, the parking lot had been cordoned off. News crews were already setting up cameras. Witnesses were being interviewed. A woman who had been in the KFC with her 2 children told reporters, "I heard the gunshots and just grabbed my kids and ran. I didn't even look back. I just knew we had to get out." Another man, a construction worker who had been eating lunch in his truck, said he saw Jamal leave. "He walked out calm, didn't run, didn't look at nobody, just got in his truck and drove off like nothing happened." Police immediately issued a BOLO alert for Jamal Washington and his vehicle, a dark blue Chevrolet Silverado. His photo was sent to every law enforcement agency in the state. The FBI was notified in case he tried to cross state lines. But Jamal wasn't running far. His phone was still on, still pinging cell towers. Detectives tracked his movements in real time. He drove east, away from Fort Walton Beach, toward the state parks near Choctawhatchee Bay. His last known ping came from a remote area near Fred Gannon Rocky Bayou State Park, a heavily wooded area with trails and a boat launch. By that evening, news of the murder had spread across Florida. Local stations ran the story nonstop. "Double homicide at Fort Walton Beach KFC," the headlines read. "Husband kills wife and father after discovering affair." Social media exploded. People who knew the family came forward with their own stories. A woman named Keisha, who worked with Carla at the daycare, posted on Facebook, "I can't believe this. Carla was always so kind. I never thought something like this could happen." Another person, someone who went to church with the Washingtons, commented, "Jamal was a good man. I don't know what happened, but I know he wouldn't do this without a reason." The comment section became a battleground, people arguing over whether Jamal was a victim or a monster. Meanwhile, police launched a full-scale search of the state park. K-9 units, helicopters, dive teams, all searching for any sign of Jamal. On the second day of the search, they found his truck. It was parked near the edge of the water, the driver's side door left open. Inside, they found his wallet, his keys, and his phone. The phone was unlocked, open to the Notes app. There was a message typed out but not sent. "I loved her. I loved him. I don't know what to do." On the passenger seat, they found a 9mm handgun, the same caliber used in the shooting. Ballistics would later confirm it was the murder weapon, but Jamal was gone. Search crews combed the shoreline, checked the trails, interviewed campers and fishermen. No one had seen him. It was like he had vanished. Then, on April 19th, 3 days after the murders, a kayaker found something floating near the boat launch. It was a body. Face down, bloated from the water, wearing the same clothes Jamal had been wearing the day of the shooting. The body was pulled from the water and identified through fingerprints. It was Jamal Washington. The medical examiner ruled it a suicide by drowning, though there were no signs of struggle. It appeared he had walked into the water and simply let himself go. But the story didn't end there, because when investigators went through Jamal's phone more thoroughly, they found something that changed everything. Something that explained not just the affair, but the real reason behind it. Something that made this tragedy even more twisted than anyone could have imagined. Detectives spent hours going through Jamal's phone, pulling text messages, photos, call logs, anything that could explain what led to that moment in the KFC bathroom. What they found painted a picture far darker than a simple affair. The first red flag came from the text thread between Carla and Robert. The messages went back 5 months, starting in November of 2023, just a few weeks after Robert had reappeared in Jamal's life. At first, the messages seemed innocent enough. "Thanks for dinner tonight. It was nice to feel like part of the family again." But then they shifted. "I can't stop thinking about you. This is wrong, but it feels so right. He doesn't need to know." The affair had started almost immediately. But it wasn't just about attraction. As detectives dug deeper, they found messages that suggested something far more calculated. In a text dated January 10, 2024, Carla had written, "How much do you think the policy is worth?" Robert replied, "Enough to start over, somewhere warm." Carla responded, "We just have to be patient." The detectives cross-referenced this with financial records. What they found was chilling. In December of 2023, just 2 months after Robert came back into their lives, Carla had taken out a life insurance policy on Jamal. It was a $500,000 policy, the kind sold by those agents who go door to door promising peace of mind. Jamal had signed the paperwork, thinking it was just Carla being responsible. He trusted her. But what Jamal didn't know was that Carla had named Robert as the secondary beneficiary. If something happened to Jamal and Carla couldn't collect, the money would go to Robert. The plan, as investigators pieced it together, was never just about the affair. It was about money. Carla and Robert had been planning to kill Jamal and make it look like an accident. They'd discussed it in coded language over text. "The stairs at his job are pretty steep," Carla had written in February. "Accidents happen all the time," Robert had replied. "Not yet. We need to be smart." But they'd gotten sloppy, or maybe they'd gotten too comfortable, because on April 16th, the day of the murders, they weren't supposed to meet at the KFC. That was a last-minute decision. Carla had texted Robert that morning saying, "He's suspicious. We need to cool it for a while." But Robert had replied, "One last time. I need to see you." And so they met, in a public place, in the middle of the day. And Jamal, who had been quietly tracking his wife's movements, finally caught them. But here's the part that made investigators' stomachs turn. When they went back through Robert's phone records, which had been subpoenaed after his death, they found something even more disturbing. Robert had been in contact with someone else, a woman named Linda, who lived 2 states over in Georgia. The messages between Robert and Linda were friendly, casual, talking about the weather and old times. But in one message from March, Robert had written, "I'm working on something big. When it's done, I'll come see you." Linda had replied, "I hope you're not getting into trouble again." Robert wrote back, "No trouble, just fixing an old mistake." Detectives reached out to Linda for an interview. What she told them was shocking. Linda was Robert's ex-wife, someone he'd been married to back in the 90s before he left Jamal's family, and according to Linda, Robert had always resented Jamal. He used to say Jamal was the reason his life fell apart, Linda explained. He blamed his son for his drinking, for his failed marriage, for everything. He said if he could go back, he never would have had kids. So this wasn't just about money. For Robert, it was about revenge. He'd come back into Jamal's life not to make amends, but to destroy him, and he'd used Carla to do it. Investigators also found a series of calls between Robert and a man named Eddie, a former cellmate from a stint Robert had done in county jail years earlier. Eddie told detectives that Robert had asked him about clean ways to get rid of someone. He wanted to know how to make it look natural, Eddie said. I told him I didn't want nothing to do with that, but he kept asking. The pieces were all there. Carla and Robert hadn't just been having an affair. They'd been planning to murder Jamal, collect the insurance money, and start a new life together. But Jamal had caught them before they could execute the plan. And in that moment, in that locked bathroom, when he saw the two people he loved most in the world betraying him in the most intimate way possible, something inside him snapped. He wasn't a cold-blooded killer. He was a man who'd been pushed past his breaking point. On April 19th, after Jamal's body was recovered from the water, investigators found one more piece of evidence that would close the case but leave the community haunted for years. On Jamal's phone, buried in the video folder, was a recording. It was time-stamped April 16, 2024, at 2:47 p.m., less than 3 hours after the shooting. The video was shaky, filmed while Jamal was sitting in his truck near the state park. His face was in the frame, tear-streaked, exhausted, barely able to look at the camera. His voice was hoarse, broken. I don't know who's going to see this, he started. Maybe nobody, maybe the police. I don't know. I just need to say it out loud because I can't carry it anymore. He paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I killed them. I killed my wife. I killed my father. And I know what people are going to say. They're going to say I'm a monster. They're going to say I should have walked away. But they didn't see what I saw. They didn't feel what I felt. His voice cracked. I gave her everything. I worked every day to make sure she was happy, to make sure we had a life. And I let him back in because I thought maybe he'd changed. Maybe he wanted to be a father, but he didn't. He wanted to take everything from me, and she helped him. Jamal looked away from the camera, staring out at the water. I found the texts. I found the insurance papers. They were going to kill me. They were planning it, and I was too stupid to see it until it was too late. He turned back to the camera, his eyes red and hollow. I didn't go there to kill them. I swear I didn't. I just wanted answers. I wanted to hear her say it wasn't true. But when I opened that door and saw them together like that, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just reacted. He shook his head, his hands trembling. I know what I did was wrong. I know I'm going to hell for it. But I couldn't let them get away with it. I couldn't let them win. He took a deep breath, looking directly into the camera one last time. If you're watching this, just know, I loved her. I really did. And I loved him too, even after everything. But love wasn't enough. It never is. The video ended. Jamal had walked into the water shortly after. The confession video was entered into evidence, but since Jamal was dead, there would be no trial. The case was officially closed as a double homicide followed by suicide. The media ran with it. Florida man kills, wife and father after discovering murder plot became the headline. Talk shows debated whether Jamal was a victim or a villain. Some people sympathized with him, saying he'd been betrayed in the worst possible way. Others argued that nothing justified what he did, that he should have gone to the police instead. The Washington family became a cautionary tale, a story used in sermons and true crime podcasts about the dangers of deception and the consequences of betrayal. The KFC on Highway 98 was closed for 2 weeks for cleaning and repairs. When it reopened, business was slow. People didn't want to eat at the place where 2 people had been murdered. Eventually, the franchise owner sold the location, and it was turned into a storage facility. The bathroom where it all happened was demolished. At the church where the Washingtons had been members, a memorial service was held. It was a strange, uncomfortable event. Some people mourned Carla, remembering her kindness and volunteer work. Others quietly grieved for Jamal, the man they'd known as dependable and gentle. Almost no one spoke about Robert. Reverend Marcus, who had known the family for years, gave the eulogy. He talked about forgiveness, about how hurt people, and how betrayal can turn love into something unrecognizable. "We may never fully understand what happened that day," he said, "but we can learn from it. We can remember that our actions have consequences, not just for ourselves, but for everyone we love." In the months that followed, the story faded from the headlines. But in Fort Walton Beach, people still talk about it. Miss Claudia, the neighbor, said she couldn't sleep for weeks after. "I keep thinking, if I'd said something earlier, maybe this wouldn't have happened." Earl Thompson, the KFC manager, quit his job and moved out of state. He told a friend, "I can't forget the look on that man's face. It wasn't anger. It was just emptiness." And Linda, Robert's ex-wife, gave one final interview to a local news station. "Robert was always a selfish man," she said, "but I never thought he'd do something like this. I never thought he'd destroy his own son." She paused, her voice breaking. "This story isn't just about murder. It's about trust. It's about the people we let into our lives and the secrets they keep from us." Jamal Washington spent 10 years building a life with a woman he thought he knew, and in a single moment, he realized it had all been a lie. How do you come back from that? How do you process the fact that the two people you loved most in the world were plotting to end your life? Some people say Jamal should have walked away, that he should have called the police, let the system handle it. And maybe they're right. But in that moment, standing in that bathroom, seeing the betrayal with his own eyes, Jamal wasn't thinking about the law. He was thinking about survival, about justice, about making sure they couldn't hurt him anymore. It doesn't make what he did right, but it makes it human. And that's what makes this story so haunting, because any one of us could be pushed to that edge. Any one of us could have our trust shattered so completely that we don't recognize ourselves anymore. So I want to ask you, what do you think? Was Jamal a victim of circumstance, a man pushed too far by betrayal? Or was he a killer who let his rage control him? How would you feel if you were in his position? If you discovered the person you loved and the parent you forgave were plotting to kill you, what would you do? Let's talk about it in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to hear your perspective. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching. If this story affected you, if it made you think, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you thought this case was intense, wait until you hear about the next one. A story about a wife who discovered her husband's double life after 20 years of marriage. You won't believe what she found. Click the video on your screen to watch it next. Until then, stay safe, and remember, the people closest to us can sometimes be the ones we know the least.